So this is Ashley's super cool van that she does her lab work through. If we take a peek in here, super simple, got the tanks, and her microscope for grading and sorting is right over here.
So one of the unique things about this van is that it's actually inspected by the USDA. So it allows us to do export to various countries. And there's some requirements with this lab. So you can see that it's its own separate compartment from the driving facility part of the van. And then there's another wall and doors that open in the far back that have all my coveralls and anything that is cow related materials. So like my coveralls and my boots, so that we have clean working spaces for processing the embryos. So this is the petri dish that we talked about. So this is what was hanging in the black pouch around my neck when we were flushing by the cow. So this top up here is where the media was coming in, and so that's the petri dish. And then you can see kind of that whitish layer in there. That's the filter. And so media flowed in this side through the filter and then exited out this side of the petri dish. So what we're actually doing next here is we're going to take this all apart so that our petri dish is one piece. We're going to rinse that filter off, so anything that's potentially stuck onto the filter, we're going to make sure that that's all removed. And then so then this is the filter. You can see that there's mucus and debris that was all captured by the filter. And so we're just going to end up rinsing that down all into the petri dish here so that we can search for the embryos and see if we're successful today.
So from flush to petri dish, what is the lifespan of an embryo? You know, how long do you have before you need to freeze or put these embryos back into a ricip?
Yeah, so in vivo embryos are pretty sturdy and pretty hardy little embryos. They're a little different than our counterparts that were made in a petri dish or fertilized in a petri dish. And so with an embryo like this, they actually will stay viable for like 24 hours. But the biggest thing is the old saying is nothing good happens outside of the cow. So if we know we're putting them in fresh, we try to do that as soon as we can. But if we need to transport or locate to another, say the recips are another facility, we can do that. But then for freezing, from the time we finish the collection until freezing, we really want to try to keep that under 3 hours.
Okay. So you found a couple embryos and you are going to remove them from the petri dish.
Correct. So we end up using a different type of media than what we actually collected with. And so the next media that we end up using is a little more robust. So this has a little higher nutrient content in it. It has some different what we call surfactants, or things to make the embryos not sticky. So embryos really like to stick to plastic. So we have some special ingredients in these different medias. We also have some special syringes that we use. So you can see there's no rubber stopper like what you'd see in a normal syringe that you use for giving antibiotics or other injections, vaccines and the like, because some of those different petroleums in the lubricants for those syringes or in the rubbers themselves are toxic to embryos. And so that's part of the cost adding to embryos also, is that we have special plastics that we know are non-embryo toxic, because lots of things can kill embryos. And so some of these different materials actually are human grade products too. So we really want to make sure we have the best environment for the embryos. So the embryos get washed through a series of what we call wells of the petri dish, and that's just to clean off the debris and all of that mucus and cells and everything else that just normally is in the uterus, and wash that all away, because there's potential bacteria that can negatively impact your embryos, eat up all their nutrients. So we wash them through a series of wells with media, and then the last thing we end up doing is loading them in a straw. So these straws are 1/4 cc, so they look a lot like your semen straw. So it has a cotton plug on it, and we load the embryo up in the straw so that we can load it into a gun, just like you would with semen, and then we would have them ready to go into the recips. So this straw now has an embryo in there, and we can just go transfer that into a surrogate or a recipient animal, as we call them, and it should make a viable pregnancy.
And if you want to freeze this for later, is there any more steps, or do you just pop it in your tank?
Yep, so then we use a different type of media, a cryoprotectant, and what that does is helps replace all the water in the embryo. If we were to just stick this embryo like what we did right now, if we just stuck that in liquid nitrogen, the embryo would basically explode, because water expands, just like what we experience in winter time, so cracks in your cement. The same thing would happen on the scale of an embryo. So we have to use special media to make sure that those cells get protected, and that they can tolerate being dropped into a liquid nitrogen.